I'm Gianna Scott. I am the founder of LTST. This is our third event, and welcome to our web series.
Hi, everybody. I'm Austin Cresswell. I am born and raised in Gainesville and a volunteer for the Seat at the Table events.
Hello, everyone. I am Anjanette Martin. I am a team member of L. Maxwell Planning. We are the group that started and planned with Gianna's leadership, putting LTST together. I am a Gainesville native and excited to be here.
I am Missy Embry. I was raised in Gainesville and I am an LTST volunteer.
Today we're going to talk about the current state of Gainesville and the things that we think can make it better. So Austin's going to start us out.
Definitely being put on the spot there. I mean, I guess everybody, if you're watching this, you probably know the current things going on in Gainesville in regards to the Confederate statues that are up at the park and the one on the courthouse square. Probably more predominantly the one on the courthouse square. And kind of the purpose of the Seat at the Table events is to discuss and have these conversations that are hard conversations, which is what we're doing. I mean, these are topics that have been long unaddressed in our community. Like I said, I'm born and raised in Gainesville, been here for all of my life with the exception of the 4 years that I went to college, but I came back and really noticed even more so the differences and inequities in the Gainesville community and the Cooke County community, really, that are glaringly obvious, but for whatever reason, swept under the rug in a lot of ways that I don't entirely understand and can't always wrap my head around because there's a lot of voices that are rightfully so speaking up in this time in this community, a lot of voices that don't feel like they've been heard throughout even longer than my 25 years here. My 25 years is kind of a short time compared to the hundreds of years of inequities and discrimination that's gone on in this community. And I feel like this is just we're at a breaking point and a culminating point of really fixing the deep-seated issues within the community.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, they question and they ask, well, why now? And that's it. Like, it's been this way for so long, but why are we doing something about it now? And why is it such a big deal now? And so, I mean, a part of us, and I guess that's why we're here, is to answer those kind of questions. Like, why now? Of course, it seems like the majority of the protests, and we know we haven't had any riots, but I mean, riots that were nationwide or anything started, with the George Floyd death. And that was like, people are, they said that they use him as an excuse to act up. He was definitely not an excuse, but he was a catalyst in my opinion, he was a catalyst to a movement that was necessary, that had been deep-seated for so long. And when you have so many people that are affected by this and so many people that are active on this, you keep the momentum going. And I think that's where it was. Gainesville has the momentum. Gainesville now has the voice. They feel that they have a voice where they're actually being heard. Before, you could kick and scream and do all you could, but was never heard. They didn't feel like they were being heard. They didn't feel like anybody took them seriously, because it may have been a few people that may have gotten together, but now with this movement, there are more people than ever that are showing up and feeling like they are actually being heard and being seen, and people are listening, and we can make things happen. So that's why now, because we've done it so many years before. Our parents and our parents' parents and our parents' parents' parents have tried to do things, and we're still doing it. And so it's sad that it's taking so long for things to like really get to moving, and that's where we're at a point where people are just getting tired of fighting. And like, we are tired of the fighting, but we want people to listen. this is why we're here. We're wanting things done. And so now is the time, because now is the time for us to be heard. If there's no more time to sweep anything under the rug. This is not a sweep under the rug sort of situation any longer. And so now that we have the momentum, and now that we have the voices, and now that we have the support, even in Gainesville, but nationwide, it's now is the time to listen.
I think that it's crazy how people think that George Floyd was the first one.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you're asking yourself why now, it's like, have you not been paying attention to everything else that's been happening? And that's part of the problem. Like, either you knew and like you just didn't care enough until stuff was, being burned down, or you knew and you just felt like, like you said, you just swept it under the rug. It's like, we're telling you our lives matter. And your response is, well, my life matters too. And it's like, that's not the point. That is not the point at all. Like, yes, your life matters, but you're not wondering whether or not, when you walk out that door, if you're going to make it home.
Yeah.
So the fact that you don't have to worry about that, consider that a blessing. But not everyone has that same luxury of not having to worry about whether or not their son, their grandson, their father, their uncle is going to make it home whenever they walk out that door. So right now, Black Lives Matter. And until people realize that Black Lives Matter just the same as your lives matter, then it's going to continue and continue and continue, and it's just going to get way worse before it gets better.
I think the difference with George Floyd's situation was that you can't, it was recorded.
Mm-hmm.
That was the big difference, is because you can always hear about situations, you can even witness situations, but if there was only one or two witnesses, then that's it. But the world saw this.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that was the biggest issue, because you cannot deny this. You can't deny it. You can't, you can't say it didn't happen. You can't close your eyes. This is in your face, and there's no doubt about it that this is happening. And so when you couldn't get rid of the evidence, you couldn't do that. So now that's when people are like, oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
If you haven't experienced it, or if you haven't known it, the people who don't know that it was happening are seeing it, and they're just now seeing it. So, I mean, it's amazing that people are just like, oh, this happens. And you're like, wow, really?
Yeah.
This happened? But this is this is some people's experience of seeing it. And this is their first experience of seeing it, I think. So that's why they're like, oh, okay.
I think also, especially for the Gainesville community and the Cooke County community, it's really hard for people in this community to imagine anything different than what's in this community. And I don't say that to discount the marginalized people that are in the community, because obviously you're a Gainesville native, you live in Gainesville, mm-hmm. You're here. But the Gainesville community does a really good job of out of sight, out of mind. And so there's not a Black man getting killed by police brutality here. So it's not affecting our community. And I think for far too long, but at the same time, you can't say that without saying this is also the community that had X amount of numbers of KKK members surrounding the Confederate monument that people are discussing right now. And so it's like, this does affect our community, maybe not in the same ways, but it's very easy to tell, like, this community has almost a sense of complacency of, if it's not right in our face, then it's not happening here. But racism exists here. Discrimination exists here, right, for all marginalized communities. Mm-hmm. It's just uncomfortable for the majority to actually acknowledge and face that.
Well, I mean, Gainesville is experiencing a smaller scale version of what's happening as a huge narrative in this country of polling police officers who believe, like, I think that it's like between 80 and 90% of police officers believe that racism doesn't exist, that has been eradicated in the country. And Gainesville's experiencing that on our small scale, but it's a national narrative that we're all trying to battle. And here, I feel that in our own little bubble, it's kind of like percolating in a really, it's people are refusing to be ignored or unheard anymore. And I think that it is disrupting the way that the status quo, as you would say.
That's exactly what I was about to say, was it's disrupting the status quo. And unfortunately, the status quo of Gainesville and the Cooke County community
It's changing.
is changing,
Mhm.
as it should. I mean, we are 100 years since that statue has been, more than 100 years since that statue has been put up. It's okay for things to change, and I think that's the thing that the Gainesville community, I say Gainesville, but really this is a Cooke County community issue, like, especially at this point with the one that's on the Cooke County, or the House Square, like, there's, I mean, the discrimination is very deep-seated when it's really coming out now, because it's people are adamantly against listening to the marginalized perspective. And I mean, it's very telling the things that are heard by the people that were elected to represent us, because there's a large faction of the community that's not being heard or being represented. And that's very sad, and being actively actively suppressed in their voice. But that's what these conversations are for.
And it was always accepted. It was always like, this is
The
how
status
Gainesville
quo is
is.
accepted.
Right.
That's just Gainesville. This is just how Gainesville is. Well, why does it have to be that way?
Or
And
why
so-
is that okay?
Why is that okay? Why,
Yeah.
why is that acceptable? This is not acceptable just because the way that it is. No, that's not acceptable. And so now we're showing this is
And I think that's why it took, so long for groups like this to be formed, because you were told, like, okay, well, this is how Gainesville is. You can't go on that side of town making this person mad, or you can't say that because you're going to make this person mad. But it's like, at some point you're just like, I don't care.
Yeah.
Like, I don't care. Like, if you're telling me that I can't speak on something that is so dear to my heart, that it's, directly affecting people that I care about, or not even directly affecting people I care about, but directly affecting people of my race, and you're telling me you can't speak because you're going to get in trouble, why should I receive any type of backlash for doing what's right? Like, you should be just as mad as I am.
Yeah.
Like, it shouldn't just be us against them. It's like a human race issue.
Yeah.
Like, it should be all of our problem. Like, we should all be upset. We should all be fighting for the same thing. Like, it shouldn't be, because right now in Gainesville, it feels like there's about 20% of us trying to do the right thing, and then 80% that's like, well, you guys are doing some crazy stuff, like, we don't want any part of that. And it's like, no, it should be, everyone should be coming together. We should be able to talk about things that are, happening in Gainesville, Cooke County, what have you, and we should be able to come together to have some type of solution, so that it doesn't seem like there's just some radical group out there trying to, cause a ruckus in Gainesville. Because that's not the goal. The goal is much bigger than that. And if it's like, if you only see our group and, Pro Gainesville as a type of group that's trying to cause chaos in Gainesville, it's like, you're missing the entire point.
Yeah.
You're missing the entire point if you don't understand the why, not the how.
Well, and so I think that so many on that particular side of the issue look at it as a personal attack against them, which all of that, it's like, we can't make you feel that way. We're just doing what we know is right. And so I think that it dives into that idea of, that means that you need to take a step back and look at your situation and what you can learn from what we're attempting to bring forth in the community. Because I feel like so many of the comments that I see, it feels like they think that we're issuing a personal attack on everyone in Gainesville who disagrees with us. And it's not. I mean, that defeats the purpose of us trying to unite the community behind what's right.
Mm-hmm.
And unite the community, and then also join with the powers that be that can make those changes, make the changes, make the laws or the rules, or to be able to make those changes. Because as long as you just have people that are arguing and protesting and things like that, but if they're not reaching those people that can actually make those changes, it kind of defeats the purpose as well. And so that's what I loved about our first two sessions, is because we were getting those people, inviting those people in. It's like, it's not just, not this person and that person, or just our community members, but is our community members and our elected officials. And because those are the ones that can, our elected officials, or our, like our superintendent, a superintendent of our ISDs, we have our mayors, we have our, county officials. We needed those people, our police chief. Those are the people that can really make some moves. Those are the people that can make a difference. So if we having those discussions with those people are very, very important as well. And that's what I like about this group. It's just not, what people think is just arguing, bickering between two people. But it's like, no, we're talking to some people that can make some changes. Mm-hmm. And so that's what we're trying to do.
Well, and to kind of like piggyback off of that a little bit, I think that it's when our elected officials and our people in power in town legitimately see boots on the ground, the people that they're representing in their community, in their county, I think that it makes a bigger impact. And I feel like we are providing the avenue for the community to be able to have these conversations with people in power in our community on both sides of this movement in Gainesville.
And I think like in Gainesville, kind of going back to like what you're saying about social media with George Floyd, like George Floyd, that murder was like, it was very prevalent. You could see all 8 minutes of it. There was all 8 minutes of what happened in that exchange, regardless of the cops' past, regardless of George Floyd's past, which doesn't matter in this instance. Like, he killed a man, period. But like, it's very easy. It's not easy to watch that on a phone, but it's easy to separate your own mind and feelings from a phone screen. And so it desensitizes to that. And I think that this community oftentimes has a hard time creating an empathetic imagination to think of, oh, George Floyd was a human, And I don't always understand why the empathetic imagination in that vein in this community is extended towards the cops in that situation. Because we cry for justice, and I'm like, you people want to talk about George Floyd's rap sheet, but mm-hmm. do they ever? I never hear the conversation come up questioning the fact that the cops involved also had a rap sheet of
excessive
force of complaints against them. And I'm like, why is the empathetic imagination extended towards the cop and saying the cop has families, has a family, has whatever he has, when it's like George Floyd is also a person. He's probably a brother, a son, a father, whatever he is in this life. I'm like, there's, for whatever reason, this community, and I think communities across, this is obviously a countrywide thing, but it's in talking about our community, I'm like, we have a really hard time actually thinking about each other as humans. And it's just like the people that aren't even gearing up to listen to either Pro Gainesville or Seat at the Table events, they're not extending that humanity towards these people, and they're not extending that towards the marginalized people within Cooke County. And it's there's a lot of, I don't know, I guess I'm kind of rambling, but there's a lot of rhetoric right now about like, well, you got to trust the democratic process. They voted no on the monument. They're protecting what the community wants. And I'm like, well, the democratic process represents all of us, not just the majority. The majority might elect those people, but those people have to represent every person and every viewpoint, which is, they've got a hard job to do. But if they didn't want to do it, then why are they sitting in those seats? And that's just kind of, if you don't want to represent every race, creed, gender, sexuality, everything, they all exist here in our community. And it's, for me, I'm like, gone are the times of trying to say that they don't exist or pandering to one side of the community, or it should be gone at the times. But we're having this conversation in 2020, so.
I think it's really hard for people to turn their heads and criticize about a situation that doesn't directly affect their home.
Yeah.
And so that is what we have. We have so many people that it does not directly affect them. Like, they do not see that as, they do not see this situation, they do not see this movement as a direct effect of their home. And so they try to ignore it, or they try to let it go. But then there's so many of us, of others of us, who saw this as this could have been I look at my son. I have a 14-year-old son. This could have been my son.
Mm-hmm.
This could have been my brother. This could have been my father. And so when it switches gears, and then you have people like on total opposite ends of the spectrum here that are, like you said, desensitized about it because it doesn't affect them. But then you have some other people that are more empathetic to the situation because they say this could have, and they see this could have very easily been someone that I am very dear and, very dear and close to me just as easily as it was him.
But then you have, in saying what you just said, you have the people that it doesn't directly affect them, but then they want to tell you how you're supposed to handle the situation. Mm-hmm. So it's like you can either A, have a conversation with me and allow me to tell you why this is happening, why we feel the need to have conversations and protest. Or you can just take a seat and just educate yourself before you get on social media and say, well, you guys should have done A, B, C, and D. Because I just, for me personally, I think that's one of the things that really bothers me is when people who have no idea what, we're going through as a, I should say as a culture, what we're going through. And they're quick to call names. They're quick to, label. And it's like, why are you on my post telling me what I'm doing wrong when it has absolutely nothing to do with you? You're not coming here, with positive criticism, which it's like at this point, even positive criticism, you can keep it. It's like you're just here to, start more mess. Like to add on to what's already going on right now. You're just here to cause drama. And it's like all you had to do was just keep swiping. Mm-hmm. Just keep going. Yeah. Unfriend. If you don't like the things that are being, said on your social media, and that goes for, if they're following any of us, because I know that I share a lot of stuff, and I know that sometimes it ruffles people's feathers, and I'm at the point where I just don't care. Like for me personally, I'm fighting for something greater than your feelings. Like I'm fighting for people to be treated equally. I'm fighting so that when my child gets old enough, she's not treated with the same, situations that I've been treated with, because I vaguely remember my first time of being hit with racism, and I was in the 2nd grade. Like I don't want my child to ever have to go through that. All I was doing was simply asking for a crayon, and I was told to use my skin. Like as in 2nd grade, so when people say that it starts at home, it does. Because you can't tell me that a 2nd grader knew to say that without it coming from the household. Mm-hmm. So for me, it's like I'm doing this so that younger generations don't have to, because older generations had to. And look, we're here. We're still here.
Yeah.
We're still here. Like nothing, there has been changes, yes, but it's like I pray that there's a greater good in all this, and I pray that people learn to watch their words and be kind. Educate. That's my main thing. Just educate yourself. It takes nothing for you to Google something. You Google everything else. Google, why this is happening, and then pass it on. Like there's different ways to help this cause. There's different ways. If you don't feel comfortable going to the protest, okay, fine. If you don't feel comfortable coming to our event, okay, fine. But you can have these conversations with people in private. Yeah. Like if you know what's going on is terrible and you have it in your heart, even if it's one person, have a conversation with them and allow them to understand why this is happening instead of constantly just turning the other cheek.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Or being a keyboard warrior.
Or being a keyboard warrior.
Well, and it's like asking people to be adaptable to their own, what they may have been taught in K through 12 schooling, or what they would have been taught in their home. Like it's very easy from the time that we are children to be like, well, this is what I was taught when I was 5, so this is what I know for the rest of my life. But I'm sorry, but I'm about to be 25. When I was 5, that was 20 years ago. And that was in 2001. So just for perspective, I'm like, 2001, that was 9/11. Like, that was a big time that things have changed a lot in the last 20 years. Like, why would I've changed a lot in the last 25 years, like, or 20 years, whatever the timeline is, math. But like, it's perspectives change, and it's okay to adapt those with new information. Humans should be gathering new information throughout their entire life. And I think it's how the institutionalized racism and discrimination and systemic racism and discrimination really affect this community is we believe what we're told when we're 5. And it's like, we're all much older than that now. We can take on new information and not look for things that are confirmation bias, but, you know, there's media out there that represents not the mainstream. You know, there's a whole Black Stories section on Netflix that like has great documentaries. There's podcasts, there's readings, there's people have done the research. People just aren't listening to it and aren't willing to listen to it. And it's, you know, and a lot of that does go for both sides. I feel like it's easy to get confirmation bias on both sides, but that's where it takes a critical thinking of who's writing the media that you're consuming, who's writing the posts. Are they Black voices? As a white person, I can talk on the community that I lived in till I'm blue in the face, but like, I don't experience and that's where I'm like, we need to encourage people to have empathetic imaginations, because I'm like, I'll never be able to experience the fear that a Black man or Black woman has when they're pulled over by a cop. But I can empathize with you and be like, hey, that's something I've never thought about, that you have to think about your son in that situation. You know, I run every day. I'm a runner. When Ahmaud Arbery was killed, I'm like, I'd never have to worry about taking a jog through my neighborhood. I'll go jog at 11 o'clock at night. And I'm like, that thought never crosses my mind. But I can understand, oh, wow, what if I had to think about that? And that's where I'm like, oh, this is cut and dry for me. This is an experience that's happening for people. I can't discount your experience. And that's not something that people tend to offer or extend.
It's for some reason they take empathy out of the equation.
Yeah.
And I don't know where it gets lost.
And it's this weird, it hasn't happened to me, so that must have never happened to anybody.
It's not prevalent if it hasn't happened to me.
Yeah.
it's pretty much, I didn't hear it. No.
It's this out of sight, out of mind thing that I'm like, why?
And it's like, for years, it seems like Black people have been put in this box where they're this, they're that, they're this, they're that. So it's already been like implanted in your brain that like a Black person is going to represent all these things, so that when you see them, you automatically, and if you don't know them, you automatically have this idea in your head as to how they're going to talk, how they're going to act. So like, you have your guard up thinking that this person is here to harm me. This person is here to talk crazy to me. This person is here to be loud with me. And it's like, we're never given a chance to be outside of that box. And so now we're here saying, I'm not everything that society has told you that I am. So please leave me out of that box. You know, like, I'm here to tell you that, yes, I'm Black, but I'm this, and that. Like, I'm not angry until you make me angry. I'm not loud until you... It's weird.
It's almost like you're human with human emotions.
Exactly. Like, heaven forbid I get upset because you said something to me that hurt my feelings. Like, heaven forbid I react, you know?
And then you're the angry Black woman.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, I look at it and I'm like, what's the big deal if you're in that box? You know, I'm like, there's nothing wrong with being a human with,
right, because
like, it takes all kinds to make up the world,
and
even if
race,
you're in that box, you're still a human,
right,
regardless of if you're in the box or not.
And someone else who's a different race can be in that same box, but then their life is not on the line, you know? Like, but if a Black man is in that box and he checks all those X's out of that box, you know, like, this is whenever you have police brutality
Mhm.
because he checked all those, you know, like he
Profile.
or he was just simply driving while black, you know, like you just. I have seen so many videos where the police officer sees that it's a black man and his hand's already on his gun. It's like, have you even said, you know, introduce yourself like I'm, you know, officer so-and-so, whatever. You know, have you ever even let this man open his mouth before you decided he was a threat to your life? And that's what I mean by being put in a box. Because of those characteristics that black people are known to have.
Stereotypes. Even locally, if we want to go into locally, there's a box of what side of town you live on.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if we're on the other side, you know, whether it's being on the other side of the tracks or whatever. But you know, there is a side of town that all black people are supposed to live on, even in Gainesville. Side of town that you live on, or what your last name is, who are your family members. And so there are very large families that will already judge you based on your last name. In Gainesville, I mean, it's you know, I won't say those last names. If you live in Gainesville, you know who those last names are. But I mean, it's like someone will say that last name, like, oh, you're one of them. Oh, you're one of them. Yeah. And that already that's already a problem from the very beginning. The person can't even open their mouth. Yeah. Before they're already grouped in a certain box or a certain category, just by their address or just by their last name.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes beyond even the across the tracks of Gainesville. I graduated from Munster High School and went there for junior high and high school, got a decent education, but smaller community, significantly less diverse than even the Gainesville community is. And I remember, you know, the first time in 7th grade, which you're like 11 in 7th grade, 10 or 11, like, no, you're older than that. I don't know. You're however old you are in 7th grade.
You're some age.
You're some age that's not 24. And below 18. But I remember like having friends come to Gainesville and I'd get in the car with them and they'd immediately be like, oh, we need to lock our doors. And like be on edge. And I just remember thinking, why? And for me, it was a moment of, I'm like, I grew up here. Like, this is weird. And like, there were people that called it Gainesville with a G. Like, there was this weird narrative of like, we are super violent. And that narrative was always associated with the people of color in this town, with the black community, with the Latinx community. And I'm like, I'm like, have you ever talked to anybody from this town that wasn't white? Like it, and that's the issue that is in both Gainesville and Cooke County as a whole. Is I'm like, there's a lack of actual integration between groups of people.
Mm-hmm. We're as separate as we can be without it drawing a too much attention.
Just different. And I mean, I know it's been a little while ago. I can give you a little example of when I was taken to German Fest for the very first time, and being in Munster. Someone that took me to German Fest was like, hey, you know, at the time it was my husband took me, and at the time we were just dating, and he knew somebody that worked at the gym that visited the gym that he worked at. And it was pretty, you know, he introduced me to that person, and they kind of pulled him aside and was like, wow, I'm surprised you brought her here. Like, why? Like,
I mean, honestly, my friends have invited me, and I'm like, no, thank you.
But yeah, I mean, he flat out said, you're bold to bring her here. And it's like, wow. Yeah. Really? Is it like that? I mean, I've lived in Gainesville all my life. I just never thought to go to German Fest just because I really wasn't ever invited. Didn't even think about it. But then he had gone before, and I go there, and I mean, and we didn't even have to ask why. It's like you already knew. But
which is so sad. And
it's you know, and it's like, why is that acceptable? Why is that even acceptable to be like, you are not? You're not welcome.
It's the box that this community puts people in.
Exactly.
And I mean, this was the 90s, of course. But
well, I'm talking like 2010 and now.
Is it any different 20
I mean,
something years later?
The world might have made a lot of strides in optics of publicity, but I don't know how much people's hearts have actually changed.
Yeah.
And that's what these conversations are for. That's what these protests are for. That's what all of this action is for, is to, I mean, when you don't listen to people for years and years and years,
they get used
you
to
just
not
expect
talking.
them to shut up.
And they
like,
get used to not talking.
Or they
Yeah.
leave, because
Yeah.
that's another huge thing. Is where when we talk about, you know, like how much Gainesville has actually changed and things like that. Like people leave here all the time, and if they come back, they don't come back necessarily because they enjoyed the community
Right.
itself. They come back for, there are other things that have to outweigh it. I'm coming back because of this opportunity, not because
living is lower. Or
Yes,
something
it's
like
not
that.
because I
That's
feel
me.
welcome in this community.
That's
I
my.
mean, honestly, with me coming back, it had nothing to do with coming back to the community I grew up in.
And-
It wasn't.
I mean, that to speak to my own experience as a queer person, like, I don't want to live in this community. Not that the queer plight is anywhere near the history or the lineage of Black Americans, but I mean, this community doesn't accept marginalized peoples very well, and it's a very pressing issue, and like I am very happy to be back in this community because my family's here, my roots are here, and I like being in this community. I want this community to be the best that it can be for everyone, and I think that's the thing that a lot of people in this community have a hard time wrapping their head around, is this community isn't great for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
This community is great for a small faction of people, and other than that, they expect you to say, well, if you don't like it, leave town. And I'm like, that's a really piss poor way to look at life.
And not
for lack of a
everyone
better
can just
term.
do that, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I'm like, why would I want to just leave a place? And also that rhetoric just further makes the marginalized peoples not want to not have a place here. Because
Mhm.
when you say that, you're saying, well, you don't have a place here.
Right.
If you don't like what's happening because of your existence, you can go somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And my question to that is, where are Black people supposed to exist?
Right.
If not
Why
in
is
this
that
community.
acceptable?
Mhm.
Why is that acceptable to say go home? Go.
Yeah.
I am
Yeah.
home. You
Yeah.
know, it's like,
yeah.
I'm like,
I'm
it's
home.
because and it's the simple fact of it is that is, if you're saying that to a Black person, if you're saying that to a queer person, if you're saying that to a trans person, that is racist, homophobic, and transphobic to whoever you're saying it to.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and also, just to go off on a tangent on that, those are definitely hot button words of, I don't think any of us are calling any particular individual any of these things, but it is very, it takes me 2 seconds to acknowledge that I was raised in this community and I have some deep-seated systemic racism beliefs that I've had to counteract with anti-racism, with actually thinking like, oh wait, this is not, this rhetoric that I've been taught, maybe this isn't the right thing. Maybe, you know, like, just history of Martin Luther King, maybe I wasn't fed all of it. Maybe I wasn't fed all of the true history of slavery. Like, looking into things with a critical eye and acknowledging like the things that I've taught maybe do give me some implicit bias. Not even maybe. I'm like, I can own up to the fact that I'm like, I have biases and I've dealt with biases, and every day I have to be like, Austin, those biases aren't true. And it's a product of upbringing in this community,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and it takes a village to raise one child.
Yep.
Starts in the home, then goes through K through 12. Like there's just a lot of things that this community does great, but there's a lot of things that this community needs help with
And
needs to address and acknowledge.
yeah, and in commenting on everything you just said, I just want to say that as LTST, we're not primarily only concerned with white and Black issues. We are aware that there are issues that go beyond just white and Black, and I want to encourage the Hispanic community to reach out, because I know for a fact it's not just us going through it. I know. I have friends that tell me stories. I am very aware, and I promise you that, like, if the community, the Hispanic community, wants to come to us and they want to be included, just reach out. Like, I just want to put that out there. Just reach out, because I am willing to help anyone who is going through any type of racial injustice. And like I said, I know it's not just us right now. I know that. And I know that in the Hispanic community, a lot of them are afraid to come and speak out because of their status. So just know we're here for that as well. Just throwing that out there.
It's the intersectionality of these issues. They aren't just a one group issue, because like Gianna, you said earlier, like this isn't a political issue. These aren't like they've been politicized forever, but it's really sad that we as a country, as a county, as a city, we have to put into law something that should be so easy to comprehend, that people are people. And these issues are intersectional, which is the beautiful thing about Seat at the Table, is we're addressing things as a whole. Like, yes, right now, the most pressing or maybe not the most pressing thing, but the biggest pressing thing is the issues and racial injustices within the Black community. But I mean, these issues are intersectional across the board.
Just know we're just getting started too. So
yeah,
also throwing that out there for you guys who think we're going away. We're just getting started.
It's a moment of, we've been here for a long time. We're just talking now.
Yeah.
Please listen.
Please listen.
And I mean, it takes creating these brave spaces that are places where there can be differences of opinion, because it's not, we all have a pretty similar opinion on a lot of these issues, but a lot of the Seat at the Table have had people that have differing opinions across the spectrum, which is the beautiful thing of this community isn't just filled with marginalized or minority people. We're just asking that you see all peoples in this community and bring your opinions here and let's talk about them.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's also, we're welcoming, correct me if I'm wrong, we are even opening up and welcoming people of opposing views. If you do have those opposing views and you would like to speak with us and we have these conversations just like we are here in a productive manner, if we can have some constructive and productive conversations, then yes, we welcome you here to come sit with us and have these discussions, because we need to hear those things, because we're all getting, we all agree and we all get along for the most part, but we do need to hear the reasonings behind that. Not saying it's going to change our mind to think we're going to hate somebody else, but at least we want to, and we educate ourselves as well. We're not incapable of being educated, and we don't know everything. So we are here to be educated on everything, on all the viewpoints, just as much as we would like to educate another person on their viewpoints, and see what they have to say. So this is not by any means a one-sided conversation. I guess that's the best way of putting it. This is not a one-sided conversation. We welcome anyone who is here to have a productive conversation. We're not here for drama. We're not here to be unproductive to fights or anything like that. But as long as we can sit and have a productive, constructive conversation, come on.
Yeah, and I mean,
and bring your friends.
And I think people also hear that of, well, you need to educate yourself, and they think it's us saying, well, you're stupid and you need to get smarter, and that's not what we're saying at all. Like, just because you're seeking out education or learning, that means you're human.
Right. I've learned more.
Yeah.
In this, I've learned more. I've educated myself.
That's how I look at it. I'm like, every time I talk to anybody or go to a protest or go to a Seat at the Table event or have a private conversation with anybody, it's all opportunities to learn. If we're not learning and growing, then we're not doing our due justice as humans. Like, we got to buck up and realize that there are gaps in our knowledge all across the board, especially within this community, and be willing to have these conversations and be willing to actually listen, and get out from behind a keyboard, because I just feel like a CNN headline, a Fox headline can say whatever it wants, but until you talk to a Black woman or a white woman or somebody else with a different perspective within your community, then those headlines mean not a lot.
Right.
It's taking those headlines and using your critical thinking skills.
Right.
Applying them to the human experience.
Yeah, and applying them to the human experience. It's qualitative and quantitative research. we should all be doing it.
Mhm.
Because a lot of the stuff is data driven.
Yeah, it's out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's
We're not hiding it.
that, which I mean also might be a disconnect within this community. Is a lot of, I feel like a lot of the data within this community might be more qualitative, might be more story driven, and
Mhm.
people have a hard time for whatever reason believing people's stories. I don't know.
Like
I
they just decided to make up one day. You
Yeah.
know, I was, racially profiled. Like
Yeah.
who wants to go through those things? Who wants to make up that they went through those things?
Mhm.
Like I don't think anyone would willingly go out into the world knowing that they're about to get hit in the face with racism.
Yeah.
I definitely don't think that's a thing, but I do want to say that we were having a conversation earlier that we've noticed that a lot of people are trying to put Pro Gainesville and LTST against each other, and I just want to go on record to say that we are going towards the same goal. If you guys follow me on Facebook, you saw that I made a post about, we're going towards the same goal with different angles. That's what we're doing. We support them. They support us. We're doing it different ways, and if protesting is your thing, please go support them. And if, just simply talking at a table is your thing, come support us or support both. But just know that we're not against each other.
You don't have to choose a side.
Yeah, you don't have to choose a side. Like I said, they support us, we support them.